Have you ever looked at your life and wondered if everything was falling apart? Maybe the doors keep closing. Maybe the answers never come. Maybe you've been praying the same prayer for so long that you've started to wonder if the words are just bouncing off the ceiling, going nowhere, heard by no one. Maybe you're lying awake at 2 in the morning staring at the ceiling, too exhausted to pray but too afraid to stop. Maybe you've been waiting so long for a breakthrough that you've started to wonder whether the breakthrough was ever coming at all. Maybe you've watched people around you step into the things they were hoping for while you were still standing in the same place, and the questions are getting harder to push down. Why not me? Why not yet? What did I do wrong? Is he listening? Does he care? But what if I told you that what looks like chaos from where you're standing is actually God's divine construction site? What if the very situation causing you pain today, the very thing that feels like it's breaking you in half, is the same situation God is actively, deliberately, lovingly transforming for your good? Don't turn away from this message too quickly, because before it ends, you will see your struggle through an entirely different lens. God is in control. He is working, and He has not forgotten you. There is a particular kind of suffering that comes not from the pain itself, but from the terrifying feeling that no one is steering the ship, that the universe has gone silent, that somehow, somewhere, things have slipped out of God's hands and fallen into the hands of chance, or fate, or worse, into the hands of people who do not wish you well, who have more power than you do and less concern for what is right. That feeling is real. The exhaustion behind it is real. The disorientation is real. The tears are real. But the conclusion that feeling leads you to, that God has lost control, that He is absent, that He has stepped back from your situation, that part is not true. It is a conclusion drawn by a heart that is in pain and a mind that is overwhelmed, and it deserves to be met with compassion, but it also deserves to be met with truth, because one of the most important things a soul can learn in this life is how to stop letting emotions write theology, how to let truth hold steady, even when feelings are screaming in the other direction. When life feels out of control, the instinct is to assume that it is out of control, that what we feel must reflect what is real. But feelings, as powerful and as significant as they are, were never designed to be the final authority on truth. A storm feels permanent when you are standing in the middle of it. The darkness feels total at 3 in the morning, in a way it never does at noon. Pain feels endless in the moment of its sharpest intensity, but the storm does not determine the outcome. The darkness does not determine what is actually there. The pain does not determine the final verdict on your life. God does, and God has already spoken His verdict. You are loved, you are held, you are seen, and the plans He has for you are good. Those truths are not subject to revision based on how your circumstances feel this week. They are fixed, they are permanent. They are the foundation under your feet, even when everything above the foundation is shaking. Think about what it actually means to say that God is in control. It does not mean that life will be painless. It does not mean that every door will open and every prayer will be answered on your schedule. It does not mean that you will be exempt from hardship or that believing in God functions as a kind of insurance policy against suffering. What it means is something far deeper and far more solid than any of that. It means that there is not a single molecule in this universe that moves outside of His awareness. There is not a single detail of your life that has caught Him off guard. The job you lost, the relationship that ended, the diagnosis that came out of nowhere, the plan that collapsed before it ever got started, none of it surprised Him. None of it made Him scramble. None of it caused Him to revise His intentions toward you. He knew. He knows. He has always known. God is not reactive. He is sovereign, and sovereignty means that even the things that feel like disasters to us have already been factored into a plan that is far larger, far wiser, and far more beautiful than anything we could architect on our own. His plans do not bend to our circumstances. Our circumstances bend to His plans even when we cannot see how, even when we cannot track the mechanism by which that bending is happening. It is happening. Trust that. The prophet Isaiah records God saying something that should stop every anxious heart cold. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done. Read that slowly. Declaring the end from the beginning. That is not the language of a God who is improvising, adjusting, recalculating as new information comes in. That is the language of a God who has already seen the end of your story and is walking you through the middle of it with absolute precision, perfect knowledge, and unwavering intention toward your good. He does not see your present circumstances and then wonder how to work with them. He saw your present circumstances before you were born and already knew what he was going to do in them, through them, and beyond them. So when your life feels chaotic, when the circumstances feel impossible, when you cannot find any logic in what is happening, that is not evidence that God has stepped away from your situation. That is evidence that he is doing something in dimensions you cannot yet perceive, in timelines that extend beyond what your current vantage point allows you to see. You don't have to understand it to trust it. Understanding is not a prerequisite for faith. You just have to hold on long enough to see it, and you will see it. He has promised that much. I know that is easier said than done. I know there are seasons where holding on feels like the hardest thing a person can do, when every morning begins with the same weight and every night ends with the same unanswered question. But even in those moments, especially in those moments, God is not absent. He is not distant. He is not indifferent. He is present, and he is working, and he has not for 1 second lost his grip on your life. The chaos you are feeling is not the final chapter. It is the middle of the story, and the author of that story does not write stories that end in defeat for those who trust him. So hold on, because what looks like the end is often just the turn of the page. But if God is in control, why does everything seem to be taking so long? That is one of the most honest questions a faithful person can ask, and it deserves an honest answer. The truth is this: God has never once been in a hurry. Not when he led the Israelites through 40 years in the wilderness on a journey that should have taken 11 days. Not when he let Lazarus stay in the tomb for 4 days before he showed up. Not when he allowed Joseph to spend years in a pit and a prison before placing him on a throne. God's pace is not determined by our comfort. It is determined by his purpose. And the gap between those two things, our comfort and his purpose, is where most of our frustration lives. Here is what most people do not see when they look at a closed door. They see rejection. They see failure. They see proof that something went wrong, that they asked for the wrong thing, that God has a different opinion of their worth than they had hoped. But more often than not, a closed door is not God saying no to your future. It is God saying not yet, and sometimes, more importantly, it is God saying not that way, not with those people, not under those terms, because he can see around the corner. He knows what is behind that door you are so desperate to open. He knows what the relationship you are grieving would have cost you over time. He knows that the opportunity that slipped through your fingers was designed by someone with intentions that would have drained you of more than you ever gained. He knows that the path you were trying to force was going to take you somewhere that looked impressive from the outside but would have left you quietly hollow on the inside, disconnected from the things that actually matter, further from the person he is trying to make you than you were when you started. A closed door is not the end of your story. A closed door is God's protection wearing the uncomfortable costume of disappointment. And sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is trust that the door that did not open was held shut by a hand that loves you. Think about Joseph. He was 17 years old when his own brothers stripped him of his coat and threw him into a pit. Not strangers, his brothers, the people who were supposed to protect him, who shared the same father and the same table and the same inheritance. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver to a group of traders heading to Egypt, and then they sat down and ate a meal as though nothing of consequence had happened. Joseph didn't just lose his freedom that day. He lost his family, his identity, his future, everything he thought his life was going to be. And from a human perspective, from the perspective of a young man lying in the bottom of a pit in the dark, there was no way to see the end from that beginning. There was no way to know that the pit was a corridor, not a grave, that the betrayal was preparation, not punishment, that Egypt was not exile, but positioning. There was no way to know, in that moment, that every person who wronged him was unknowingly serving the plan of a God who had already determined the outcome. And yet, that is exactly what was true. God was working. Every step Joseph took toward Egypt, toward Potiphar's house, toward the prison was a step engineered by divine sovereignty toward a throne that would one day feed a starving world. Not a single step was wasted. Not a single injustice fell outside the perimeter of God's redemptive purposes. What looks like abandonment is often assignment. What looks like interruption is often redirection. And the reason God can afford to work slowly is because He is not operating on your timeline. He is operating on an eternal one. Every detour He allows has a destination. Every delay has a divine design. The road may be longer than you expected. The season may be harder than you hoped. But God is behind the scenes of your life, and He is doing something. He is always doing something. You just cannot see it yet. The problem is not that God isn't working. The problem is that we want His timing. Let's talk honestly about waiting, because waiting is not passive. It is one of the most active, most demanding spiritual disciplines there is. Anyone who has ever sat in a season of delay knows that waiting is not simply the absence of doing. It is the presence of trusting when nothing in your circumstances tells you that you should. It is choosing to believe that God is faithful when the evidence feels scarce. It is deciding, day after day, to keep your hand in His, even when the path in front of you is dark. That is not weakness. That is one of the most powerful things a human soul can do. And here is what is true about waiting seasons that nobody tells you when you are in the middle of one. They are not wasted. They are not empty. They are not God putting your life on pause while He attends to more important things. They are active preparation. They are the season when God is doing some of His most significant work, not in your circumstances, but in you. Every person in Scripture who was eventually used greatly by God went through a prolonged season of waiting first. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before he stood before Pharaoh. David was anointed king as a teenager and did not sit on the throne for roughly 15 years. Abraham waited 25 years for the son God had promised him. The waiting was not the delay of the plan. The waiting was part of the plan. Because God is not just trying to get you to a destination. He is trying to build something in you that can handle the destination when you arrive. Patience is not something you develop by reading about it. It is forged in the fire of circumstances that give you no option but to wait. Humility is not something that grows in seasons of success. It grows in seasons of dependence, when you have run out of your own resources and have nothing left but God. Faith is not something that gets stronger in easy times. It gets stronger when it is tested, stretched, pressed, and still somehow survives. And character, the deep, settled, unshakable kind that God is after, is not built in a weekend. It is built in years of quiet faithfulness, of choosing to keep going when it would be easier to stop, of deciding again and again and again to trust the one who knows the end from the beginning. The waiting season is not wasted time. It is the season God uses to build the kind of person who can carry the blessing He has prepared without being destroyed by it. A blessing placed in the hands of someone who is not ready for it can do more damage than good. God knows this, and His refusal to rush is not cruelty. It is wisdom dressed in the clothing of delay. So if you are in a waiting season right now, I want you to hear this with every part of your heart. The delay is not punishment. The silence is not rejection. The slow pace of things is not evidence that God has forgotten your name. It is evidence that He is thorough, that He is careful, that He loves you too much to rush the work He is doing in your soul. Let patience have her perfect work, because on the other side of this season, you will look back and understand what He was building in the dark, and you will be grateful, deeply, genuinely grateful, that He did not cut the process short. And while you're waiting, God is transforming more than your circumstances. This is the part that is hardest to hear when you are in pain. When your circumstances are the source of your suffering, all you want is for the circumstances to change. You want the answer to come, the door to open, the situation to resolve. You are focused, understandably, on the outside, on what you can see, on what you can measure, on what you can point to, and say, yes, that is better now. But God's primary focus has never been on your circumstances. His primary focus has always been on you, on your soul, on the person you are becoming in the middle of what you are going through. Pressure has a way of revealing what is inside us. Not what we wish were inside us, not what we present to the world, but what is actually there. And most of us, if we are honest, carry things that need to be brought to the surface before they can be healed. Fear that has been living in us so long we've mistaken it for personality. Shame that we buried so deep we forgot it was there until something happened to dig it up. The need to control everything around us because we are terrified of what happens when we can't. Old wounds from people who should have loved us better. Wounds that have been quietly shaping our decisions and our relationships for years without us realizing it. God does not use pressure to punish you. He uses it to expose what needs to be healed so He can heal it. The difficulty you are facing right now is not proof that He is against you. It is often proof that He is close to you, doing the kind of deep work that can only happen in the crucible of real hardship. He is burning away the dross, the pride that kept you from needing Him, the self-sufficiency that kept you from leaning on Him, the false identities you have built up over years of trying to protect yourself from pain. He is stripping away the layers of self-protection that have kept you safe, but also kept you small, that have insulated you from hurt, but also insulated you from growth. He is making room in you for something greater, more love, more courage, more peace, more faith, more capacity for the life He has designed you to live, by removing the things that were crowding it out. This is not a comfortable process. There is no version of pruning that does not involve cutting. But the gardener who prunes the vine is not trying to harm it. He is trying to maximize its fruitfulness. Every branch that is cut back for a reason, because the gardener knows what the branch is capable of producing, and he knows that without the pruning, the branch will never reach that potential. God knows what you are capable of. He knows the fruitfulness that is locked inside this season, and He is pruning you for it, not against it. Let Him. This is uncomfortable. There is no way to dress this up and make it sound easy. Being transformed is painful in the same way that physical therapy is painful, in the same way that the refining of gold requires heat. But the purpose of the pain is not destruction. It is perfection. Not perfection in the sense of flawlessness, but in the original sense, completion, maturity, wholeness. God is making you whole. He is doing it through this season, through this hardship, through this fire. And when He is done, what comes out on the other side will bear absolutely no resemblance to what went in. You will be stronger than you were. You will be freer than you were. You will carry a peace and a depth and a compassion that you could not have developed any other way. But God isn't only changing you, He's also changing the situation around you. Here is something worth sitting with. Even when you cannot see it, even when there is no visible sign of movement, the situation around you is being rearranged. The right people are being positioned. The right opportunities are being aligned. The things that need to be removed from your path are being removed. The things that need to be added are being prepared. God is working simultaneously on you and on everything around you, coordinating 1,000 details that you will never even know about, adjusting the variables in a way that can only be described as divine orchestration. Think about the image of a tapestry. When you look at the back of a tapestry, the side that is being worked on, the side that faces the frame, it is a mess. There are loose threads hanging in every direction. There are colors that don't seem to go together. There are knots and tangles that look like mistakes, that look like someone lost track of what they were doing. If you had never seen a completed tapestry before, you might look at the back of one and conclude that the whole thing was a failure, that whoever was working on it had no idea what they were doing. But when you flip it over and see the front, the side that is being woven into beauty, you see the picture clearly. You see how every color was intentional, how every thread was placed with a purpose that the back could never have revealed, how the very knots and tangles that looked like chaos on the back were the mechanism by which the most intricate and beautiful details were being created on the front. Right now, you are living on the back side of the tapestry. You can see the threads, but not the picture. You can see the process, but not the product. You can see the knots, but not the rows they are forming. But God is looking at the front. He is weaving something, thread by thread and moment by moment, and it is more beautiful than you have allowed yourself to imagine. Every thread of your story, even the dark ones, even the ones that look out of place, is part of it. The connections you need are being prepared. The provision that seems impossible right now is already in motion. The relationships that will change your life are being positioned around you, even as you read these words. You are not stuck, even when you feel stuck. You are not forgotten, even when you feel forgotten. The pieces are being placed. The puzzle is being assembled, and the day is coming when you will step back and see the full picture, and you will be undone by the faithfulness of a God who was working, even when everything in your life told you he had stopped. Even your pain is being used by God. There is a lie that suffering tells, and the lie is this: this is meaningless. This is just pain. It is not going anywhere. It is not building anything. It is not producing anything. It is simply and purely and terribly loss. That lie is one of the most devastating things a suffering person can believe. Because the moment you believe that your pain is meaningless, you lose not only the comfort of hope, but the ability to find any purpose in endurance. Why keep going if nothing is being built? Why hold on if nothing is coming from this? But God does not waste pain. Not a single tear, not a single sleepless night, not a single moment of grief that felt so heavy you thought it would crack your chest open. Every bit of it is being used. Job lost everything: his children, his wealth, his health, his comfort, the goodwill of the friends who should have carried him. He sat in ashes and argued with God and wept without answers for so long that the arguments filled an entire book of Scripture. He was not a weak man. He was not a faithless man. He was a righteous man in unbearable pain, and he said so, loudly, honestly, without sanitizing what he felt. And God did not strike him down for his honesty. God honored it, because what Job did throughout all of that darkness, what he never, ultimately, did was curse God and walk away. He wrestled, he wept, he questioned, but he stayed. And at the end of the story, God restored to Job double what he had lost. Double the flocks, double the abundance, a new family, new health, new honor. But the greater gift, the thing that mattered more than the restoration of circumstances, was what Job now knew about God that he had not known before. He said with absolute clarity, "I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you." The pain produced the encounter. The suffering opened a door to the presence and the reality of God that prosperity and comfort had never opened. And that encounter, that first-hand, unmediated, "I have seen you with my own eyes" knowledge of God was worth more than anything else that was restored. Your pain is doing something similar. The suffering you are enduring is not closing the door between you and God. It is opening it wider than it has ever been opened before. Joseph wept in prison. David cried out from caves. The Psalms are full of men and women who were in genuine anguish, genuine confusion, genuine despair, and who found that God met them there, not after. Not when things got better, there, in the prison, in the cave, in the pit, in the darkness, in the waiting room of hope. God is not only present in your victory, He is most powerfully present in your suffering. And the suffering you are enduring right now is not going to waste. It is building something in you that cannot be built any other way. It is preparing you to help someone else who will one day be exactly where you are right now. It is producing a testimony that will, at the right time, give someone else the courage to keep going. Your pain has purpose. Your tears have weight, and not one drop of them is falling unnoticed. And when the enemy thinks he has won, God does something extraordinary. There is a pattern in Scripture that is almost too stunning to believe when you are in the middle of it, but unmistakable when you look back. The enemy attacks. The enemy thinks he has succeeded. And then God moves in a way that not only reverses the damage, but transforms the very weapon of destruction into the instrument of restoration. What the enemy meant for evil, God turns for good. It is not just a nice phrase. It is the operating logic of the kingdom. Joseph's brothers meant to destroy him. They meant to silence him, to erase the dreams God had placed in his heart, to remove the brother they resented. But every step they took to harm him was a step that moved him closer to where God needed him to be. The pit they threw him into was the beginning of the road to Egypt. The slavery was the corridor to the palace. The prison was the classroom where he learned to interpret dreams, the very skill that would one day place him before Pharaoh. The enemy's plan to destroy Joseph became God's vehicle to deliver nations. What they meant for evil, God used for good, not in spite of the harm through it. And then there is the cross, the most devastating defeat the enemy thought he had ever achieved. The arrest, the trial, the beating, the nails, the death of the Son of God on a Roman execution device, in front of a crowd that mocked him, was the very moment when everything was won. The thing that looked like utter, total, irrevocable destruction was the act of ultimate redemption. The moment that should have ended everything was the moment that opened eternity. The weapon the enemy believed would silence the voice of God forever became the instrument through which the silence between heaven and humanity was broken once and for all. 3 days later, the tomb was empty. The stone was rolled away not to let Jesus out. He needed no stone rolled away, but to let humanity in, to let us look inside and see that death had been defeated, that the grave was not the final word, that resurrection is the grammar of the kingdom. And if God can take the cross, the most brutal instrument of suffering and death ever wielded against his own Son, and turn it into the greatest triumph in the history of the universe, what makes you think he cannot take what has been done in your life and turn it into something extraordinary? If he can redeem the death of Jesus, he can redeem your story. No situation you are in is beyond the redemptive reach of a God who raises the dead. The attack you are currently enduring might be the sign that a breakthrough is imminent. Resistance always increases when something significant is at stake. The enemy does not expend this kind of energy on things that don't matter. He does not press this hard on lives that aren't positioned for something meaningful. If he is pressing hard on your life right now, if the attacks feel coordinated, if the opposition feels unusual in its intensity, if you feel like you are fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously, it may well be because he knows what is on the other side of this season, and he is terrified of it. He knows what you do not yet see. He knows the breakthrough that is being prepared. He knows the authority you are going to walk in, the lives you are going to touch, the testimony you are going to carry when this is over. And he is trying to stop you before you get there. But he cannot stop what God has decreed. He can create difficulty, and he can cause pain, and he can send discouragement, but he cannot override a plan that was authored in heaven before the foundations of the world. He is a defeated enemy using the appearance of power to convince you he has won. Do not believe it. Hold on. Do not surrender the territory of your faith. Do not let his pressure convince you that God has abandoned you. God is in this. He is working. And what looks like defeat today is about to become one of the most powerful demonstrations of his faithfulness that you have ever witnessed. But how do you remain strong until the breakthrough comes? There is a kind of peace that makes no logical sense. And that is exactly the kind Paul describes when he writes that the peace of God surpasses all understanding. It does not come from having good circumstances. It does not come from getting the answers you've been waiting for. It does not come from the storm stopping. It comes from the presence of the one who is greater than the storm. And it is available to you right now, in the middle of whatever you are going through, not after it is over. The disciples were in a boat in the middle of a violent storm. The waves were breaking over the sides. The men were experienced fishermen. These were not novices who panicked at every wave, and they were terrified, which tells you something about the severity of what they were facing. And Jesus was asleep in the stern, his head on a cushion, completely and utterly at rest. That detail matters enormously. He was not pacing the deck, anxious about the outcome. He was not standing at the prow, grimly fighting the waves with white knuckles and clenched teeth. He was asleep, at peace, at rest, utterly untroubled, because he knew something the disciples did not yet know. He knew that the storm did not have the final word. He knew that what looked to them like an imminent catastrophe was not a catastrophe at all, because he was in the boat, and nothing, no wind, no wave, no force of nature or force of darkness has the authority to overturn a vessel that carries the Son of God. The disciples had not yet learned that lesson. So they woke him, terrified and accusing, "Don't you care that we're perishing?" And he did not lecture them. He did not explain the storm or unpack its purpose, or deliver a theological treatise on divine sovereignty. He simply stood, spoke to the wind and the water, and there was a great calm. And then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Where is your faith?" It was not a rebuke. It was an invitation to understand that his presence in the boat changed everything. Not the absence of the storm, his presence in it. God does not always still the storm before you ask him to. Sometimes he lets the storm run its full course because there is something in the storm that is doing a necessary work in you, because there is something the other side of the storm contains that could not be received without the journey through it. But he is in the boat. He is in the room. He is in the hospital hallway, in the courtroom, in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, when you are falling apart, and there is no one else awake to call. His presence does not depend on your circumstances being resolved. His presence is not conditional on the outcome being favorable or the timeline being comfortable. He is there now, in this, with you. And because He is there, you do not have to be consumed by fear. You do not have to be destroyed by the uncertainty. You do not have to be paralyzed by not knowing how this ends. You can be still in the middle of the storm, not because nothing is happening, but because the one who controls everything is with you, and He is not afraid of what is happening to you. He has already seen the other side of it. He is already there, holding your future in His hands, and calling you toward it with a steadiness that no storm can disrupt. Peace is not the absence of pressure. Peace is not the resolution of circumstances. Peace is the presence of God in the middle of pressure, in the middle of unresolved circumstances, in the middle of the unknown. And that peace, the peace that surpasses understanding, the peace that makes no sense to anyone watching from the outside, is available to you. Not when this is over. Now, in this moment, reach for it, ask for it. Sit quietly in the reality of His presence, and let it be more real to you than the noise of your circumstances, because it is more real. He is more real, more powerful, more certain, more close than anything that is pressing against you right now, and He is not going anywhere. And because God is with you, His promises still stand. Promises have expiration dates. Products expire, contracts expire, commitments between people expire sometimes sooner than they should, but the promises of God do not expire. They are not subject to the conditions of your circumstances. They are not weakened by the length of the wait. They are not diminished by the difficulty of the season. The word God spoke over your life before you were born is still true today. The purpose He placed in you is still intact. The future He sees for you has not been canceled, revised, or withdrawn. He still remembers. That is one of the most powerful things you can say about God in a season when you feel forgotten. He still remembers. He remembered Noah when the floodwaters covered the earth, and the rain had not stopped for 150 days, and the text says that God remembered Noah and every living thing, and He caused the waters to subside. 150 days of water, of silence, of waiting on a boat with no shore in sight. And then, God remembered. He remembered Hannah when she had wept herself empty at the temple, when her prayers felt like they were going nowhere, and the people around her misunderstood her grief. He remembered her, and she bore a son named Samuel, who would grow up to speak the word of God to a generation that desperately needed to hear it. He remembered the Israelites in Egypt after 400 years of silence. 400 years. Generation after generation born into slavery, crying out to a God who seemed to have gone quiet. And still He remembered. Still, He moved. Still, He delivered them with such power that the memory of it echoed through every generation that followed. If He remembered them after 400 years of silence, He has not forgotten you in this season. He cannot forget you. Your name is written on the palms of His hands. That is not metaphor. That is the permanent record of His commitment to you, engraved before you ever drew your first breath. He still provides. The same God who rained bread from heaven in a desert every morning, not once, not occasionally, but every single morning for 40 years, who filled a widow's jar with oil that never ran out, who fed thousands of people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, and had baskets of leftovers to spare. He is your God today. The miracle has not retired. The provision has not run dry. The resources of heaven are no less abundant today than they were in any moment of Scripture. He provides for you because He is your Father, and a father does not forget the needs of his children. He sees what you need. He knows what is coming before you do, and He is already preparing the provision before you even know to ask for it. Sometimes that provision will look exactly like what you prayed for. Sometimes it will look completely different, better, stranger, more creative, more generous than anything your limited imagination allowed you to ask for. He is not limited by what you can envision. He is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that you ask or think. He still restores. Whatever has been broken in your life, relationships, health, finances, dreams, dignity, time, years, God is in the business of restoration. Not partial restoration, not a settlement, full restoration. The kind that makes you look back and say that what God rebuilt was better than what was there before, more solid, more genuine, more free. Joel speaks of God restoring the years that the locust has eaten. The years, not a consolation prize for what was lost, not a reduced version of the life you were supposed to have. The years themselves, the seasons, the time. He can restore what time stole, what people took, what circumstances destroyed, what your own choices cost you. His restoration is thorough. It is generous. It extends not just to the visible damage, but to the roots, to the places inside you, where the wound went deep, where the loss left a hollow that you have been living around for years. He can fill that hollow. He can restore what you stopped believing could be restored. His capacity to redeem is not limited by the extent of the damage. It is limited by nothing, because with God, nothing is impossible. And that brings us to the final truth you need to hear today. This is not the end of your story. I know it may feel like it. I know there are moments when the weight of the situation is so heavy, and the wait is so long, and the disappointments have accumulated so deeply that your mind starts to tell you that this is as good as it gets, that this is where the story stalls, or ends, or fades into something smaller than what you hoped for, that maybe the life you dreamed of was a dream and nothing more, and the time has come to make peace with a smaller version of things. But that is not the voice of truth. That is exhaustion speaking, and grief speaking, and the accumulated weight of a season that has gone on longer than you expected. And the enemy, who is also always speaking, is adding his voice to that chorus, telling you to give up, to settle, to lower your expectations, to let go of the things God placed in your heart. But God's voice says something different. His voice says, I know the plans I have for you, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Future, hope, those are present tense realities, not past tense memorials. God spoke those words to people who were in exile, to people who had lost everything that made their lives feel like home. He spoke them to people who were surrounded by a foreign culture in a foreign land, who had every human reason to believe that the best chapter of their story was behind them. And he said, I have plans for you, for your future, for your hope. Those plans have not been canceled. Not by the exile, not by the loss, not by the years that have passed. And they have not been canceled for you either. God is still writing your story. You are not at the end of it. You are in the middle of it, and the middle of a story is not where the final verdict is delivered. The middle is where the tension is highest, where the circumstances look their worst, where the protagonist doubts the most. It is the part of the story where, if you stopped reading, you would put the book down convinced that things were hopeless. But the author knows how it ends, and he has declared in Romans, in the language of absolute certainty, that for those who love him, who are called according to his purpose, all things work together for good. Not some things, not the pleasant things, not the things that were obviously useful from the beginning. All things. The betrayal, the delay, the loss, the confusion, the silence, the waiting, the closed doors, the broken promises from people who were not God. All of it is being worked together, like ingredients in a recipe you don't recognize yet, but that will taste like something extraordinary when it is finished. So let the evidence speak. Look back at what God has already done. Look at the moments in your own life when things looked impossible, and then, somehow, something shifted. When the provision came from a direction you never expected. When the connection that changed everything happened in a moment, you weren't even looking for it. When the prayer you had almost given up on was answered in a way that took your breath away. He has been faithful before. He will be faithful again. The God who has carried you this far has not developed a sudden interest in abandoning you now. His faithfulness does not have an expiration date. His commitment to you does not weaken with the passage of time. He was faithful in the beginning. He is faithful in the middle. He will be faithful at the end. Do not give up. I know you are tired. I know the road has been longer than you expected and harder than you planned for. I know there have been nights when the faith felt thin and the hope felt fragile, and you held on by nothing more than a whispered prayer that you weren't even sure reached the ceiling. But you held on, and that matters more than you know. Every day you chose to trust him when you had no earthly reason to trust is a day that was recorded in heaven. Every prayer you prayed in the dark was heard. Every tear you cried was caught. Scripture says, he keeps our tears in a bottle. That is how closely he tracks your sorrow. That is how personally he regards your grief. Nothing has been wasted. Nothing has been lost. Nothing has slipped through the cracks of his attention. Keep praying, not because your words will change God's mind, but because prayer keeps you connected to His heart. It realigns your perspective when everything around you is trying to distort it. It is the act of turning your face toward the one who holds your future and saying, "I don't understand this, but I trust you." And in that act of trust, something shifts, not always in the circumstances, not right away, but in you, in your peace, in your clarity, in your ability to endure and to hope and to continue walking forward when everything in you wants to stop. Keep trusting, even when the evidence is thin, even when the waiting has gone long, even when the people around you have stopped believing on your behalf and you feel like you are carrying the faith alone. Keep trusting, because trust is not the absence of doubt. Trust is the decision to keep walking toward God even when the doubt is loud. It is faith exercised in the dark. It is the most courageous thing a human soul can do, and God honors it. He meets it. He does not leave the person who keeps trusting Him to stand alone in the dark. Keep walking forward by faith. Take the next step, even if you cannot see 10 steps ahead. That is what faith is: not sight, not certainty, not the full picture laid out before you. It is taking the next step with confidence in the one who is guiding your feet and who can see every step after it. He has not brought you this far to leave you here. The road you are on leads somewhere. The journey you are in the middle of has a destination, and the destination is good. One day, and that day is closer than you think, you will look back at this season. You will look back at this exact chapter, the one that felt like the worst chapter of your life, the one where you weren't sure you would make it, the one where the nights were long and the answers were scarce, and the faith was all you had left. And you will see it differently. You will see the hand of God in places you thought were empty. You will recognize the protection in the closed doors. You will understand the purpose in the pain. You will see how He was working, quietly and constantly and faithfully, even in the moments that felt most silent. And you will be undone by the faithfulness of a God who never left, never wavered, never changed His mind about you, not for a single day. Hold on, trust Him. Keep your hand in His and keep walking, because God is in control, and He is transforming the situation around you for your good, and your breakthrough is closer than you think. This is not your end. This is not even your worst chapter. This is the chapter where God transforms everything, and the best of your story is still ahead.